All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's the platform. Cut taxes, cut climate regulations, toughen up law enforcement, and boost the nation's energy production. No, that's not the Trump administration's new platform coming in for the second term. That's actually the platform of a conservative politician in Canada. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, as Justin Trudeau announced that he was going to, there's a lot of Pierres in the news these days, announced that he's going to step down from the prime ministership. One of the potential candidates to take his place is a Canadian populist conservative whose name is Pierre Poilievre. I'm not sure how you actually pronounce his name.
Gesundheit.
Anyway, thank you. And Pierre made a name for himself during the COVID thing. Remember when those truckers, they had that like barricade of truckers at the border? And well, apparently he supported the truckers who were protesting because of the restrictions brought about by the COVID epidemic, or rather by the government's reaction to the COVID epidemic, and has grown in popularity. So there are several other candidates, including one from Trudeau's own party, but this guy has as good a shot as anybody. And these two quotes stood out to me. This one is from an interview with Pierre Poilievre, who said when he was asked, why do you think you've garnered such support and why are people coming and lining up behind you? And he said that he thought it was finally, there's someone who's focusing on letting me take back control of my own life and create a great future for my family. So this is what he says. Trudeau, on the other hand, says, we need an ambitious, optimistic view of the future, and Pierre Poilievre is not offering that. And I was like, Justin, did you read the previous quote? Because I thought it was very positive to say, Stephen Green, that this politician thinks he's catching on because he's basically saying to people, hey, why don't you control your life? Why don't we get off your back? And why don't you build a great future for your family? Do I just not understand what an optimistic view of the future is, Steve?
Well, here's the thing. Number one is the correct pronunciation is Justin Castro. Canadians have a pretty good idea of what a future under Castro is going to look because he's been in power for about 10 years now. They can look back and extrapolate forward and say, ooh, and this is why the Liberal Party, I think that's the name of Trudeau's party. The Liberal Party is their poll numbers are they're this big. They're tiny. These guys are going to get their heinies handed to them in I think the election's in October. And Castro was supposed to step down, I believe, in March. God, if I'm Canada, I'm just is it March? Shit, every single day. The country's just in terrible shape. It's been a decade of progressive mismanagement. Malmanagement is actually probably the better way to describe it. Canadian liberty has just been absolutely hamstrung under this government. I don't know what my Canadians did to deserve this other than, vote for it 3 times. Stop doing that. But they'll get their chance. And we've got an interesting dynamic here. There was an article that, sadly, I didn't write at PJ Media today or yesterday, that there's really a global Trump election underway. Yeah. It's not just Trump in this country. We're watching conservatives take power in Austria. I have no idea why King Charles hasn't dissolved Parliament yet in Great Britain, other than I don't know, he's probably just not up to it. But that government is on its last legs. It's barely been in power, that awful Labor government. And the grooming rape crisis that I don't even want to talk about is just horrible. We're seeing it in Canada. We're seeing it all over the place. And I guess it really started in Argentina with
Javier Milei.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to behold. And I'm not saying it's going to be clear sailing all the way through, but the trend lines are finally moving in the right direction again, and I do love to see that. And Scott, I haven't technically looked into this. I haven't done a whole lot of research, But I just want to say to my Canadian friends, at least certain numbers of our Canadian friends, that I'm pretty sure that if you guys don't shape yourselves up in this next election, that as an American, it is my God-given right to annex Alberta. So I'm here for you if you need me.
And if I remember correctly, Alberta is where this Pierre Poilievre is from.
Yeah. I saw a clip of him this morning on X explaining to his constituents how inflation works and that the symptoms are not inflation. The overspending, the debt, the printing money is the inflation. And this guy's good. Keep an eye on him.
Well, it's still possible that he doesn't get this, Bill Whittle, but I thought it was interesting both for the reason, that you indicated there, that it seems like we're, having, as Steve was saying, like a global Trump election. And it is, this rising tide of populism, but it's not populism alone. I think that there's enough of a thread of at least economic principles involved here that it kind of holds together across international borders. The traditional Republicans in the United States wouldn't recognize this guy as a conservative, mostly because he's pro-choice, he's gay rights or whatever you want to call that. Although I don't think most conservatives are against rights. They're just not. They don't like to be forced to do things. He's somewhat anti-big business, or at least from a corporate welfare perspective, he's hostile toward that, and so. He doesn't check all the boxes on what somebody might look for in a traditional party conservative. Nevertheless, he stood up when the time was right and basically stood with people against oppressive government. And now he's got a pretty decent shot at capturing the prime ministership here. I wonder, because you're a student of history, Bill, does the pendulum swing all the way back to government control, or is there a happy medium somewhere where we go, okay, well, let's go to populism and not care too much about everything else, and then we kind of come back where we hang on to some libertarianism, some economic freedom, some populism, but we also balance that out with maybe a more a sound moral approach to government, if you want to call it that?
Well, from a historical perspective, there's not a happy medium. There's a happy extreme.
Yeah.
When the pendulum swings to the side of minimal government, everybody gets happier. Everybody gets richer. New York City is a great example. Rudy Giuliani turned that from a sewer into Disneyland. You could walk through Times Square at 4:00 in the morning without the slightest concern. And when the pendulum sits on that freedom extreme long enough, people begin to assume that this is now the natural state of mankind. Yeah. So they start voting for liberal politicians who make them feel good, and then the thing swings right back, and we're back in hell again. Pierre's going to walk away with this, Scotty. There's nobody else in Canada who's on the radar. It's his. I almost said it's his to lose, but I don't see how he can lose it. And
his unpopularity rating is about 54%, but Trudeau's is 74%. So Trudeau's party is going to have a tough row, even if they find a great candidate. He is.
I think he's terrific. And just a couple quick points on the things you talked with Steve about. The reason that Trudeau saw when Pierre basically says, I just want to make a better life for my family. And Trudeau says, well, I want an optimistic view for Canada. The reason he couldn't make the connection is because making an optimistic future is the job of the state. That's not the job of you. Yeah. That's not your job to run your own individual life for better. The state has to manufacture the future. And that's why he couldn't make that connection. Steve had been saying that all across the world we're seeing more conservative governments. Italy's heading in that direction. Germany's heading in that direction. France is heading in that direction. But I don't think conservative is the right word for it, because I don't think conservative is exactly the word for it in America. I think populist is the term. And what I think we're really seeing is around the world, people have had enough of being told they have to eat bugs to keep their carbon emissions down so that the elites can fly their private jets to global warming conferences. I really think that's the dynamic. Yeah. there's a lot about Donald Trump that is not a traditional conservative. And the thing I like most about Pierre is he really is the Canadian Donald Trump. He has virtually identical positions as Trump on things like, let's develop our own energy resources, let's let people make their own decisions, lower taxes, let business do their own thing, but let's keep the monopolies under control, all of this. But he's very dry. He's very soft-spoken. He's very erudite. He's the calm, polite, nice guy version. He's got a knife in his pocket if he needs to use it. He's got a rhetorical blade. He can cut to the quick when he needs to, the same way that Donald Trump can. It's just that Trump is just so much more American. Trump is like trumpets, and Pierre's kind of more like cellos, and it's a really lovely combination. Now, if we could just get Mexico on board, we could be looking at a future that could really, really make an impression for a century.
Well, that's the kind of thought that goes through my mind is like, how much further can this go? And human beings have a tendency to take everything to its extreme, and we usually find a way to screw up something that's going good. And so this is not just an American characteristic, this is just humans. So there's a part of me that says, wow, this is great, people getting more freedom, people having better financial futures, people being able to be out from under the yoke of government. And then that other little voice goes, yes, but for how long? So I'm going to try to celebrate this as it happens and enjoy this and not worry too much about the future. But, something that Bill indicated there is that the pendulum doesn't control itself. It goes back and forth and back and forth. And if we want it to stay to one side or the other, it takes a determined effort on the part of people who are willing to stand up and grab a hold of it and say, here, stay here. This is where we need you. And that will be resisted. But if we can do that with enough determination, we can let this kind of mindset about government play itself out long enough for a lot of people who currently oppose it to enjoy the benefits of it and maybe start to come around to be part of the group of people that keeps the pendulum from swinging back instead of the part that's begging for it to come back. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.